Hello students, welcome to Show Ups's classes. This is Himatri Datta. So in today's lecture we will be talking about the derivation of Marshall-Lerner condition. So in today's lecture we will derive the Marshall-Lerner condition. So in today's video we will be solving the derivation of we'll derive the Marshall-Lerner condition. For we know, first of all, we need to define a few definitions. So we need to write down a few definitions. We know PX is what? PX is domestic prices of export and PM is domestic prices of import. So it is what? So PX is domestic prices of export and PM is domestic prices of import. Now we know QX is the quantity of export and quantity of import respectively. QX and QM are what? So QM and QX and QM are quantity of export and import respectively. And finally we know the VX and VM are value of export and import respectively. VX and VM are what? Value of export and import respectively. So VX and VM are what? Value of export and import respectively. Now further we know that is the domestic trade balance, which is denoted by capital B. So we know the domestic trade balance, which is denoted by capital B, is equals to value of exports minus value of import. So this is nothing but, how do we get the value? It is quantity of export plus price into price of export minus similar thing. So this is how we get the value of export and value of import from quantity and price of export and import. Now from here what we can do is we can find the change in trade balance, which is defined by, so we can find the change in we can simply find the change in trade balance, which is denoted by DB. It will be equals to PX dQx. PX is constant, so dQx will remain here plus QX now dPx. So it is simple UV method we are solving it. So we have found this, and there will be another minus. So we'll denote by condition 2 and we'll denote it by condition 1. We'll denote it by condition 1 and we'll denote it by condition 2. Now what we'll do is we'll have to explain. Here we assume that supply prices of traded goods and supply remain fixed change. So what do we assume here? We assume here that the assumption we make here is what? The assumption is that supply prices of traded goods and services remain fixed change. So supply prices So supply prices of traded goods and services remain fixed change. So that is, the supply curves are indefinitely elastic over the range of quantity curve. So the supply curve is what? Indefinitely elastic throughout the quantity range. So throughout the quantity change, the supply curve is inelastic. So now from here what we can do is, we'll simply further explain this. Since we are looking at the trade balance in terms of domestic currency, in this case DPM is therefore equal to 0. So we will consider DPM to be 0 because we are looking at what? We are looking at trade balance in terms of domestic currency. So we are looking at trade balance in terms of domestic currency. To trade balance in terms of domestic currency, this is why DPM, changing price of import, will become 0. Whereas PX, changes by percentage increase in exchange rate, will denote it by exchange rate K. Therefore DPM is equals to KPM. On the other hand, DPM is basically equals to what? DPM is equals to, we need to remember what? DPM will be equals to KPM. Now by 10% domestic price, import increases by 10%. Now we adopt the following definition of export and import demand elasticity. Now we have to incorporate two concept of demand elasticity. So first of all, this is for elasticity of export, which will be looking like dQx by Qx here we write dx by x divided by change in dx dx. And similarly, if you write qn so this is what? This is the definition of export demand elasticity, and this is import demand elasticity. So this is export demand elasticity, and this is import demand elasticity. Now we can further write down the other equations. So we'll denote it by 3, we'll denote it by 4. Now what we can do is, we'll now write down that here Ex by E is the price of domestic export. It is the price of domestic export. It is the price of domestic export expressed in so it is the price of domestic export expressed in foreign currency. Now in terms of equation 3, the elasticity definition is reworked to arrive at the explanation for Q So we have to arrive the explanation for this in terms of the elasticity of export. So how do we do it? For this we'll write down Nx, select silent x. So as you can see, this is elasticity of export equals to, we will simply write down Px, which is written here, divided by write down price of domestic export in terms of foreign currency. For this we have to write minus EXGE divided by E square divided by Ex by E. So now if you further solve it, you will get the value to be equals to T2x by Qx into Ex by E whole divided by so it is dpx by qx. So now from here we can simply get this is divided by e dpx minus e divided by e square. And if you further solve it, you will get the value to be equals to dqx by qx divided by dpx by px minus d by e. So now from here we have found the elasticity definition in terms of, in expression for dqx in terms of the elasticity of export. Now what we have to do is, we'll simply, since we have to know that, since we know that dpx by px is what it is assumed to be 0, as dpx by px is assumed to be 0, then we can simply write the elasticity of export is equals to dqx by qx divided by minus dE by E. So if you further solve it, you will get the value to be equals to dqx by qx divided by minus k. So we will denote it by the expression 5. So now we can simply use the equation 4. So we can simply use equation 4, and we can rewrite dqm in terms of the elasticity of import, that is import elasticity of demand. So it will look like dpm divided by pm equals to nn equals to dqm. So we will denote it by equation 6. We will simply denote it by equation 6. Now we know that for a currency devaluation, Now we know for a currency devaluation to improve the trade balance, the increasing value of export has to be exceeded any increase in the value of import. So increase in the value of export has to exceed in the value of imports. In the value of imports. Now if demand for import is inelastic, or say for an example demand import is what? It is say elastic, or to be more accurate, so we will simply write down, if it is elastic,